Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a massive moment in tech history, a moment that fundamentally, and I mean entirely, flipped the economics of artificial intelligence. We're going to take a really close look at some brilliant analysis by futurist and post-labor economist Thorsten Meyer. He zeroes in on one specific month, April 2026. This was the exact month the open-weight AI curve finally crossed the closed-weight curve on the metrics that actually matter to enterprises. It's a complete paradigm shift. So today, we're breaking down exactly how it happened, why it happened, and what it means for the future of your tech stack. All right, I want to kick things off with one, frankly, mind-boggling number, 30x. For 3 whole years leading up to this point, if you said frontier model, you meant a closed API model, and enterprises paid a massive premium for that, often a 30x pricing differential. Why? Because the alternative open models were just measurably worse. You paid per token, and your only access was through the proprietary lab that built it. But, as Meyer points out, April 2026 completely shattered that pricing justification. The gap closed, and suddenly, that 30x multiplier is the giant elephant in the room. So, to wrap our heads around all this, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The April Tsunami. 2. Mind the pricing gap. 3. The Frankenstein Thesis. 4. 3 strategic shifts. And 5. What happens next?
Let's jump right into Section 1, the April Tsunami. Unprecedented releases.
Literally in the span of a single month, the old development schedules just went out the window. On April 16th, Alibaba shipped Qwen 3.6. Right around that exact same time, Meta dropped Llama 4, and Google released Llama 4. And then, boom, on April 23rd, DeepSeek releases V4 Pro. Think about that. 6 different labs, 5 highly competitive open-weight families, all in one single month. The sheer velocity of this rollout was unlike anything we've ever seen. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the open-weight ecosystem is moving at absolute breakneck speed.
And this month brought a crazy amount of variety, too. You had Mistral dropping Small 4 with a highly permissive Apache 2 license, and Zaipu AI releasing GLM 5.1. But honestly, the real standout of the pack was DeepSeek V4 Pro. We are talking about a 1 trillion parameter model with a 1 million token context window, and it's fully multimodal. The fact that a model of this massive frontier-level scale was released entirely free to download, well, that's exactly what turned the whole industry on its head.
Which brings us to Section 2, Mind the pricing gap, or what we can call benchmark arbitrage. Now look at the hard data. When we compare the absolute best closed frontier models from March 2026 to the open-weight models that dropped just a month later, the gaps are shockingly small. Reasoning, just a 2.7-point difference. Long context retrieval, a tiny 1.5 points. Even tool use and agentic capabilities were only off by 4.6 points. The performance gap on the exact evaluations that enterprises are actually paying top dollar for is now entirely in the single digits across the board. So here is the absolute kicker. A tiny 3-point gap on a benchmark test simply does not justify paying 30 times more at the API. It just doesn't. It is literally the ultimate arbitrage opportunity. If you're an enterprise, you're suddenly staring at this enormous premium for a marginal, almost imperceptible gain in your everyday performance. Meyer argues, and I completely agree, that if your 2026 AI budget was built around proprietary API pricing, well, that budget is now fundamentally broken. Let's put this in real-world terms. Think about the old CTO math. Running a customer support agent at scale might have cost you something like 30,000 euros every single month, paying a frontier lab in perpetuity. Now, look at the new CTO math. You spend 10,000 euros exactly once to host an open model on your own GPUs, and from then on, you pay absolutely 0 euros per token. Forever. The crossover point where you actually see a return on investment used to be 3 years out. Today, it has plummeted to just 3 months. Okay, moving on to Section 3, the Frankenstein Thesis. How did this gap close so incredibly fast? You'd naturally think the secret sauce was having thousands of PhDs inventing entirely new, groundbreaking architectures from scratch. Actually, scratch that. According to Meyer, it was a much more pragmatic process he calls rent and distill. Essentially, these labs with incredible engineering discipline took existing open base weights, rented US compute, and literally siphoned the reasoning traces directly from closed Western models. They ran advanced fine-tuning and distillation pipelines to ship these highly capable, stitched-together Frankenstein models for maybe 10 to 20 million euros per launch. This is the empirical proof of how that gap vanished almost overnight. Meyer summarizes this dynamic perfectly with this quote: "The moat is not the weights. The moat is whatever you refuse to show." I love this because it brilliantly illustrates that distillation isn't just some neat theoretical trick anymore. No way. It is demonstrably scalable right up to the frontier level. The major proprietary labs basically trained their own open source replacements simply by allowing their reasoning outputs to be visible and distillable.
All right, on to section 4, 3 strategic shifts. This is the new playbook. This whole shift demands 3 really vital responses from us. First, inference economics have flipped entirely. When you can run a 70 billion parameter class model for like $4 an hour, every token-heavy workflow, think summarizing massive calls or extracting data from thousands of documents, suddenly becomes radically cheaper. Second, model selection isn't monogamous anymore. It is a portfolio question. You route the hardest 5% of your queries to those expensive closed APIs, and you send the other 95% to the free open weights. Smart routing logic is your new competitive advantage. And finally, sovereignty and licensing are absolutely critical once again.
This builds directly into real-world procurement. Today, reading the license terms is just as vital as checking the benchmark scores. For instance, Llama 4 still has monthly active user caps that restrict larger companies. On the other hand, Mistral Small 4 is highly permissive, using an open Apache 2 license. And then you have DeepSeek v4, which is completely unrestricted, but it is of Chinese origin. These geopolitical realities and specific licensing quirks, that's exactly what leaders have to evaluate right now when building their tech stack.
Finally, section 5, what happens next? Let's look at the closed lab countermoves. Meyer predicts 3 distinct responses from the closed labs to try and regain their footing. First up, they're going to raise the capability bar again, probably reopening a double-digit gap for maybe 6 months before the open weights inevitably catch up again. That is just the new rhythm. Second, they are moving up the stack. Since the base models themselves are commoditizing, the new defensible product is the enterprise agent platform, stuff with long memory and deep tool integration, kind of like Google's recent $750 million platform launch. Third, you can definitely expect them to heavily lobby regulators for flop thresholds and compute restrictions on open weight training, just to protect their margins.
But amidst all this back and forth battling, there is one massive, quiet winner in all of this: NVIDIA. Think about it for a second. To run a massive 1 trillion parameter open model like DeepSeek v4 completely in-house, you need serious self-hosted enterprise infrastructure. We're talking entire data center retrofits with H200 and B200 chips. Regulators tried to restrict hardware for training, but they completely missed this massive boom in self-hosted inference. Now, every Western enterprise that downloads these massive open weights becomes a massive new hardware customer. So, what is your game plan? What should you take away from this explainer today? Here is Meyer's direct action plan for leaders this quarter. If your API spend is over 1 million euros a year, you must pilot a hosted open weight model immediately. The math absolutely demands it. If you sell an AI product, you need to build your moat in your workflow, your proprietary data, and your trust layer, because the underlying model is officially a commodity. Treat licensing terms like they are a core feature, and keep a very close eye on any incoming regulations that target the inference layer. We've seen that the structural reality is now set in stone. Frontier capabilities now have about an 18-month half-life before they are perfectly replicated for free. So I want to leave you with this incredibly provocative, vital question from Meyer to guide your long-term strategy. What part of our stack would we still pay for if the model underneath was free? Because as of April 2026, that is no longer just a hypothetical scenario. It's the new reality. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we will see you next time.